And I say this to almost everyone that I talk to who's tried various diets in the past, which is that you haven't failed. The diets you've tried have failed you. And this is a great example from that we can all learn from. And it's another one in this category where it takes real science and good information and kind of propels it into an unhealthy place. Welcome to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn, talking wellness and weight loss for real life. We're here to clear up the myths, misinformation, bad science, and marketing to teach you how to eat and how to cheat. Are you ready? I'm having salad with a side of fries. Hey everybody, welcome back to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm Jenn, your host, of course, always here. This week, I'm joined by my friend Abigail. Abby's a new voice for the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Jenn. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here too. Thank you for joining us and spending your time to fill everybody in. We know each other from working out. Surprise, surprise. Almost everybody who joins me here is somehow connected through fitness or wellness, right? But first of all,
yeah, absolutely.
Right? So funny. So first of all, how are you doing as we head into Labor Day and it's almost like month 6 of this crazy new world?
I really can't believe it. It's amazing how March lasted about 6 months, but since then, time has completely flown by. And I have to say, I am so incredibly grateful that I have a job. I can work from home. Business is good. So, every time I get stressed at work, I just remind myself how lucky I am to be in that position. And obviously I am in New York with you and I stuck it out through the pandemic and, I'm excited to slowly see, city life come back inching closer to normal day, which is really refreshing.
Yeah, it definitely is, every week, every day, bringing back the energy of the city for sure. And it's interesting because as much as we're sort of getting used to this way of life, it's like each time the seasons change, now we're getting into fall, there's a whole new set of adjustments to make.
No, absolutely. You're exactly right. And now I'm going to have to worry about matching my mask with my vest. So it's going to be new challenges ahead. But, definitely going to get my flu shot this year. So, we'll see what this crazy year has in store for us next.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, this reminds me, I'm sending a particular article to our members this week called 5 Simple Ways to Help Manage Stress During the New Normal. New normal in quotes.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a new normal. And I feel it's changing month after month. So that'll definitely be really helpful.
Exactly. So we'll just do this now. So members, this week in your inbox, you're receiving this article called 5 Simple Ways to Help Manage Stress During the New Normal. And of course, you also get a recipe. This week's recipe is for a dairy-free creamy dressing. I know you're going to love it. And one of the questions that you guys send to me a lot is about salad dressings. So I'm excited to send you this one. So to receive this article and recipe, be sure you're a member, which means go now, web browser on your phone or your computer, wherever you're listening, type glow.fm/salad with a side of fries. And here's the rundown. For just $10 a month, you get weekly recipes, a monthly article or tool like today, extra discounts from me and our partners, plus access to live Q&A sessions with me. It's seriously a bargain. And at $10 a month, it's really a no-brainer. Basically, when you take advantage of all the offerings that we give you, it's really free and a very simple way to take action toward your better health. So as we say, show yourself that your health is a priority with this membership. And remember, all you have to do is head over to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries, or click the link in the show notes to keep it simple. Once there, click support now, enter your email and payment method, then click subscribe, and you're all set to get this week's recipe for the dairy-free creamy dressing and the article, 5 Simple Ways to Help Manage Stress During the New Normal. All right, well, with that, let's jump right into today's topic, which is based on the current drama around the diet called the F Factor. So, Abigail, I know you've been following the articles and the stories. You want to fill everybody in?
Sure, I'll do my best. There's a lot going on. So I'll give just a very high level Cliff Notes version of what's been going on. So for those of you that aren't aware, the F Factor is a fiber. F means fiber. So it's a high fiber diet that was created by a nutritionist in New York City named Tanya Zuckerbrot. And with the diet was also, seemingly a lifestyle that went with it, and the big pitch was you can enjoy your carbs and your glasses of wine and lose weight too. So of course I was drawn to that. I mean, are you kidding me? That's
right?
My perfect diet. Carbs and wine, say no more, I'm in. And so she created the diet 14 years ago. And of course, with the high fiber, there's also, they encourage drinking lots of water, 3 liters a day. And when I first started following F Factor 4 or 5 years ago, it was really based off of the GG Scandinavian fiber crisp bread crackers. So a lot of the recipes were around, I still to this day use them. I mean, they are a great supply of fiber and some really delicious recipes. And then a few years ago, F Factor started releasing their own products. So they had a high fiber protein powder as well as some protein bars that they started distributing. And that's really at the core of what kind of lit this crazy drama that took off. And the first I was aware of it was earlier this month. So on August 4th, Tanya on her Instagram addressed all of her followers about some cyberbullying and that she'd been dealing with several accounts whose sole purpose were, quote, to harm her and to try and bring her down. And of course, I was like, what is she talking about? But at that point, those accounts had been deleted and I kind of forgot about it. And then on August 16th, she made another video addressing not only her followers, but also users of the F Factor diet as to some concerns that had come to light, mainly behind some other Instagram accounts. The main one is a fashion influencer actually named Emily Gellis, who's really been at the forefront of sharing people's stories as to, some pretty severe medical issues they've had as a result of these powders that they've been using. Now, of course, all of this is, I'm just a secondhand reviewer of all of this. And so I think what I found so incredible is how nasty this got. Of course you have a woman whose entire life and is behind a brand and who believes so strongly in it. And I've just been really disappointed in the way that, both sides have, it's just been a lot of attacking and fake accounts created to try and scam the other one. And, but what I've also found really interesting is that, this has gotten a lot of attention and press. The New York Times picked up and ran an article on August 24th. They were both on the Today Show on the 28th of August. So there's, it doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon.
Yeah, it's from the articles I found, there's the New York Times, the New York Post, Refinery 29, Perez Hilton, Page 6. Like, this has taken on a life of its own. And, before we kind of talk about why I feel so strongly about addressing this, you've actually tried the products, right?
I have, yes. I will say, so I've tried the protein powder. I used them to make waffles, which prior to the powder, I'd used the crumbled up GG crackers. And I did not experience any symptom. Also, a lot of the women who have come forward have been using them multiple times a day,
Right.
which, anytime you're dealing with a powder or, something, especially one with such a high fiber content, I just would limit that. So I did not experience anything, but I also didn't use it to the degree that a lot of the other women were using it. I also tried the protein bars, which candidly, I didn't like the taste. So I've got a bunch of them if anyone needs them. So,
well, wait, I'm going to have you, and we'll talk about this in a minute. They don't publish the nutrition facts anywhere. So I'm dying to see the box. If you have it or what they have on the side of the bar.
And one of the things they do, and one of the things I should have brought up that honestly, and as someone who has been in public relations at some point in my career, had they just come out at the beginning and released the COA, which is the Certificate of Analysis,
yep,
and been up front, this all would have gone away. And I'm sure there would have been some residual questions, but I think that was a big issue, and they kept saying there's proprietary information involved. But I did research, and quite a few health companies actually do release their COAs.
Yeah, everything
you can
I
always
do does.
redact any proprietary. Yeah,
yep.
So it's and I also was not impressed at time it took after they said we will release it, and that should have been in the hour, not several days or weeks after. So I think that was a bit again, had they just from back April, I guess, when this all came to light, if they just would have released that and been honest, then I think so much of this could have been avoided.
Exactly. And we're going to talk more about all of that in a minute. So basically, I want to talk for a second about why I feel so strongly about addressing this. And then we'll talk about sort of what I see as a lot of the red flags so that we can all use this as a bit of a learning experience, And so you and I talked about this briefly, but a lot of what I've heard about her program rings true for what I talk about too. And so I couldn't let it go unaddressed, right? Like I couldn't, and I tried to stay out of the fray of the fad diets and the craziness, but there's a lot in this that holds true for a lot of what we talk about. So it's really important for everyone to understand that this is another example of a quote unquote diet plan that takes real science and shares part of it with you. And in that too, the recommendations that are made almost imply and encourage you to take it to an extreme, which sets us up for failure. And I say this to almost everyone that I talk to who's tried various diets in the past. And I've mentioned this on our episode from probably almost a year ago now called How the Hell Did We Get Here? Which is that you haven't failed. The diets you've tried have failed you. And this is a great example from that we can all learn from. And it's another one in this category where it takes real science and good information and kind of propels it into an unhealthy place, right? So she talks about eating protein and fiber. Interestingly, she actually has our phrase in her book, protein and fiber at every meal. I say removing fat. She says losing weight, no big deal. Now, where I learned this from was published in 2002. Her book came out in 2006. And upon further research, there are pieces of her book that are crazy close to the book which lays the foundations for the program that I teach. Like, there's a section in the book I use called Back to the Future. and fiber factor and the fat factor. And in Zuckerbrot's book, she has a section called A Look to the Past, A Look to the Future. Her whole book is called F factor, meaning fiber factor, right? And listen, I'm not accusing her of plagiarizing or, taking this information from Dr. Sherry Lieberman and Nancy Bruning, who wrote the Dare to Lose book. Because the truth is, like, we're all working from some of the same science, right? There are commonalities in the conclusions, but it's the corresponding recommendations where things differ. And while some things are the same, it also can go awry. It's interesting too, she uses the 3-bite rule as a recommendation in her book. So that, again, was published in 2006. I learned that in the early 2000s from a coach that I was working with at the time. So again, just because this was hitting so close to home, I couldn't let this go without us talking about it. And one of the main ways that I think F factor goes awry is that you see it in her execution, right? It's based in good science, and the execution is where, we take a turn. Her recommendations for how to work with this information are leading to obsession, exacerbating food issues, and not really a healthful relationship with food. Right? She recommends actually eating 35 grams of fiber per day. We recommend 25 grams from whole food sources. And so here's the thing. The average American eats a fraction of that at 10 to 15 grams. In 2017, the American Journal of Lifestyle Medicine published that national consumption surveys indicate that only about 5% of the population meets the recommendations. So if you're taking 95% of people, right, who are insufficient in this category, and overnight they shift from eating 10 to 15 to 35 grams of fiber, they're going to have digestive issues. There are, you're like smiling and nodding, but it's so true.
Yes. Oh, no, absolutely. That's a change.
Yeah. And one that your body is going to not know what to do with. It's going to react. And while there are tremendous health benefits of eating fiber, which we've addressed before because, right, we talk about it all the time, but excess fiber intake, when in an extreme level, which can often happen when using fiber supplements and powders, it can actually clean out the good stuff from our gut as well as the bad stuff, right? So too much of a good thing can be too much. And we want to, progress to a place of our body being able to handle 25 to 30 grams of fiber per day, right? She also says in her book, and I'm quoting, "Fiber makes calories disappear." And this, to me, lends someone to think that as long as you have enough fiber or you add enough fiber, you can eat whatever you want. It takes this away from looking at the complete nutritional profile of our food choices. And actually,
yeah, and one thing I'll say, as and honestly, as someone who has suffered, from an eating disorder in my past, when I first looked into F factor and I ordered the Miracle Carb Diet book and the F factor planner, and as soon as I started to really work into it, especially in looking at what stage 1 entailed, I immediately picked up on, because I'm so fortunate to have had good counseling and nutrition advice, that this was a trigger and it was going to take me down a road I'd been down before, and it was not worth it. And again, I did benefit, there's some great recipes, and I learned, because candidly, I wasn't as aware of how, fiber can make very positive differences in your health. So I definitely did benefit from some of the recipes, but I did not, just as a personal choice. And it's not just F factor. There are plenty of other diets out there that I just have had to take a pass on because I know that road and it's not one I want to go down again.
Yeah, 1,000%. And I love that you brought that up. I have it in my notes for us to talk about later, because even in flipping through her book, when I looked at her tracker, it had those same, it brought up that it, like, my spidey sense went off of, you know, eating disorder, disordered eating issues. And so I love that you shared that, because, and I think how fortunate for you that you had that perspective and that you had a history with such great counseling to be able to identify it and to say, nope, I'm not going there. You know, because I think a lot of times people are looking for the magic answer.
Yeah. No, of course. And I think, you know, one of the other things that really I was disappointed in were some of the posts I saw that had been reshared that, you know, Tanya had shared posts of very scary thin women and comments about, you know, nothing tastes as good as skinny feels and all that stuff. And I went back and sure enough, those posts are there. And I, you know, was just really disappointed to see that.
Yeah. It's this idea of we can do whatever we want. The consequences don't matter as long as we're thin. And again, we'll come back to that theme in a little bit also. And in thinking about this and in looking at what you wrote about this idea of fiber makes calories disappear, it also hit for me a similar note and kind of a pet peeve or a nerve that I have around Weight Watchers and their point system, because you can manipulate it by adding fiber. And of course, that's not their intention, but it is what can happen. You know, and just full disclosure, you guys, just as a point of comparison, I work with a protein drink. It's a protein powder that you can make a shake with, that for some people, they need that extra support or something easy that still gives them nutrition, right? And it has 10 grams of fiber in it. And people will experience gas and bloating from that. So if that's only 10 grams, and we'll get to this in a minute, but her products have 20 grams, like that's a lot. And so knowing what I know, it's completely expected that people would have these, you know, experiences and side effects. So before we jump into what I identified as the red flags with the F Factor program, here's a quick message from our partner for this episode, Snap Cleaning Products. Make household and industrial cleaning a snap with their eco-friendly, economical, multi-purpose Snap products. Snap's concentrated multi-purpose formulas perform light to industrial strength jobs all in one bottle. Snap products give you the cleaning power of a variety of cleaners, saving you time, money, and valuable storage space. And Snap products were developed with the environment in mind, using plant-based ingredients that are biodegradable, phosphate-free, non-toxic, and bottled in recyclable containers. So I've shared this with you guys before, and I'm saying it again. SNAP actually stands for Safe for Nature, Animals, and People. So considering the cleaner disinfectant meets the EPA's criteria for use against COVID-19, and all of their products are safe for us, our pets, and the planet, it's yet another no-brainer, to be honest. And with kids returning to school, we're venturing out to museums and eating outside at restaurants, and we're just doing more that reminds us of our old life. Let's remember also the importance of washing our hands, right? Disinfecting and keeping our homes clean. So the Snap Pack actually allows you to switch over all of your household cleaning products so your home is green and clean. Of course, we get to give you a discount. So to get 10% off, text the word CLEAN, CLEAN, to 844-947-4846, and you'll receive the link and coupon code right to your phone. Again, simply text the word CLEAN to 844-947-4846. This is a toll-free number. Standard text and data rates may apply. All right, Abigail, you ready for these red flags that I found or that were red flags for me?
I am ready.
All right.
I'm ready.
So I want to talk about first in her book when she talks about restaurants, and some of her recommendations are really just not fully sound, right? We talked about how this idea, like, it sounded too good to be true. Drink your wine, eat out, live your life, and, you're healthy and well and thin is kind of what she throws out there, right?
Correct. Yes. Eat pasta, drink wine, and you will be a rail.
Right. And it implies that, we mentioned this before, but it sort of implies like do whatever you want, provided you have enough fiber. And that's just not really the case. For example, when she talks about eating out, she recommends bagels, bran muffins, and cereals as the healthy menus, choices from restaurants. Or she says the apple slices with the dipping sauce from fast food. So what I would recommend to my clients is actually none of those options for breakfast, right? I would go for the eggs and vegetables and, fast food. Sure, the apple slices, but you don't need the dipping sauce, right? So the idea is that her recommendations are just incongruous with the idea of overall nutrition, right? It's taking this one idea and running with it to an extreme. The other piece about some of this that struck me was she talks a lot about calories in the book when she talks about food choices. And again, that's a little weird if you're telling people not to count calories. It's an implied importance when you keep talking about it in the book in the way that they do, right? And the way she has you tracking carbohydrates and fiber to calculate net carbs, it also lends us to making choices of more processed foods because that's easier to get those nutrition facts because they're right on a label, right? The average person doesn't know how many carbohydrates and fiber are in an apple. So if I want to make it easier on myself in this methodology, I would choose the things that have a nutrition label, which only exists on processed foods, right? And,
Right.
Along those lines, processed foods is where we find a lot of trans fats. And when she talks about fats and the types of fats, she doesn't even talk about trans fats. So again, there's a lot of stuff where it's pieces of information and not everything that we would need to know, especially when some of the other recommendations are pushing us towards some of these processed foods if we want to make life easier for ourselves. Regarding the products themselves, so you mentioned this certificate of analysis. So basically, guys, whenever you produce a product, the manufacturer, the lab, produces a certificate of analysis. And it confirms that the product has been tested for contaminants and pesticides and heavy metals and all of the things that could be in that product. And she, F factor, because it's not her, like her lawyer too, they refused to release the certificate of analysis, claiming that it would release proprietary information. So here's the thing. This is a red flag, right? Everything I work with is, will produce the COA or, C of A. It is not crazy, even when something like if you're reading the nutrition label and it's talking about a proprietary blend, but they won't tell you what's in that proprietary blend, that's a red flag. Like they can tell you what's in the proprietary blend, but not the exact amounts and still maintain their intellectual property. If they won't show you, and they being the grand they, anyone, creating a product that you want to take, right? If they won't show you the science behind each ingredient and the sources of each ingredient, it's a red flag. So while the supplement industry can be a doozy and a full-time job onto itself, realize that, there is information out there. We talked about it before that her products were giving you 20 grams of fiber. And as you said, I think that's probably a bit much from a single food item, especially without knowing the sources of that fiber. And as you said, many people are eating more than one a day of these.
Correct.
Right?
There's some people that we're talking about how they would have 3 smoothies with this powder a day.
Ooh.
Which is obviously a lot of fiber. So the other thing is that there is a warning label on the products. It's the Prop 65 warning, which does indicate that there's lead in the products. And I did see in the COA that, and a lot of these products, not just F Factor, do contain lead. And I will say that based off of what I saw, it didn't seem like, a crazy high level, but just something to keep in mind, that through this whole process, I've learned a lot about how to evaluate, these products, and that there are resources out there so you can know what you're putting in your body.
Yeah. And a lot of these warnings and recommendations, it's based on the idea that you're eating one serving.
Right.
When we start to go multiples, as we've talked about in all of our episodes about reading labels, this is a situation where 1 + 1 does not necessarily equal 2. And it goes for these kinds of contaminants as well as the ingredients that are listed. And I do want to say, despite what many people think, pieces of this and pieces of the supplement industry are regulated by the FDA in the United States. They are supposed to monitor that what it says it has in it is actually in it. And there's an arm of the FDA called DSHEA, DSHEA, which regulates the claims that we can make about products. So while I do think the FDA can do a better job, that's really a topic for another day. But I just want you guys to know, it's not that this industry is totally
that's a whole nother session.
Right, exactly. But similar to how, Abigail, you did all this research, there are some questions that you guys can ask. So ask if whoever it is manufacturing their own supplements, right? If they are manufacturing them themselves, then certainly ask, for the certificate. You can also ask if whether this is their own facility or someone else's, ask if the manufacturing facility follows GMP, which stands for Good Manufacturing Practices. And is the manufacturing facility FDA approved, right? You can ask about other quality control measures that they take. And I do think that how someone responds to these questions can be a red flag. If their response is very defensive versus absolutely not a problem, right? There's different attitudes that come along with those different responses.
Nope. Yep.
Right? So that's sort of the product piece of it. I'm going to talk about, as you touched on before, this emotional component. So in her book, I talked about it. I saw these tracking sheets, and it has you counting grams of carbohydrates, grams of fiber, and net carbs. And I will say this is, in her practice of it, by extension, a way of counting calories, because this is the only thing she's looking at, right? And like I said, her tracker really hit a nerve for me. It's almost like, to describe it, I don't know if you would describe it this way, Abigail, but I found it almost like a checkbook in some ways, where it was very much the emphasis on counting, right? And it pushes us to choose these processed foods. Yeah. And it pushes us to choose these processed foods because the information is there on the label. And I think that's really an unintended consequence. But even looking at this tracker made me anxious. And I could see easily how someone who in the past has had tendencies toward obsessive behavior or addictive tendencies, that this would play into that completely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. For me, it triggered those tendencies. And, there's certainly, I always like to think diets are like religions, and, you might not believe in it. It might not work for you, but, you just kind of have to do what's best for yourself. And, I definitely see that there are a lot of women and men as well who've, really done well on the F factor. Just personally for me, seeing all of that, the tracking, and it was just a really slippery slope.
Yeah. And actually, there was a quote in the New York Times from Dr. Tom Hildebrandt, who is the chief of the Center of Excellence in Eating and Weight Disorders at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. And he talked about that this is a particularly vulnerable patient population. And I have chills as I say this, like, it is part of why I do what I do and why I am so careful about what I do and the way I have conversations, because of this vulnerability. And because 99% of the time when I'm talking to someone, it is not their first time around this rodeo, you know? And this kind of regimented, strict program can certainly amplify someone's issues and challenges. And then the kicker of it all for me, and I'm trying to like hold myself together as I say this. So they sell what they call an intentions bracelet. And it is, quote, you should wear it, quote, on the hand that will either undermine your intentions or honor them. And when I read that, I was literally like, whoa. Like, I am all for
and
it.
I was unaware of it like you until this whole thing. And I remember seeing the bracelet on their website. But then when I read what the intent was, like you, it sent chills down my spine. Like, it truly broke my heart.
Yes.
I mean,
because
the thought of wearing something that when you reach in to grab a chip, it tinks and you hear that and you remember your mission. And I just, it definitely reached down inside me and, triggered places that, it broke my heart that this is happening.
Yeah. And here's the thing, guys, like, I'm all for an anchor. Right? The methodology behind this is to have an anchor, something that reminds us of our bigger goals. However, we can create anchors in positive ways. The way they framed this is that it's almost like the idea of like your own body is working against you, right? It's like the hand that holds the fork is, and like, it's just so opposite of the kind of relationship to ourselves and food and our health than what we would be wanting to create. So
absolutely.
I just, I couldn't let that go. And then one of the most interesting things to me personally that was talked about in these articles was actually quotes and comments from people who used to work for them in their office. And they talked about, so this is a quote, it's, quote, the culture was a pursuit of thinness at any cost. And again, like, a consumer would never know these things. And like, none of us would ever know this without something like this. But it makes sense that the objective is thinness at the expense of health. And we actually see that in the way these recommendations play out. Right? Because while she says eat whole natural foods, she doesn't make those the easiest choices. And then we saw it in these stories.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, and then we saw it in the stories from all of these clients who spent $20,000+ with her, and some said, it became my whole life, or what, it became an obsession, or I ended up doubled over in pain kind of things. And, I think what I want everyone to realize is that this is a red flag. If you start something and it's making your relationship with food feel more obsessive or more all-consuming, stop and talk to an expert. It's just, and it's hard because we wouldn't know this idea of the culture of her company without this kind of expose of types, right, that we've been reading about in the news.
Right.
But it tracks, right? Given what I've read in the book and from the products, that wasn't a surprise to me.
No, I completely agree.
Yeah. So I guess all in, right? The bottom line is that we, as well-intentioned, results-seeking consumers, wouldn't know a lot of this on our own. And half of what I know and I see as red flags is only a function of being in this industry for, in my work for 13 years and in my life for, 20 plus. So it's the kind of thing where I want to encourage everybody to follow your gut instinct, talk to someone. It's often why I recommend, people don't just get a book or read something and start following it on their own. It's similar to, right, the book itself has a lot of really good science, certainly some parts that are a little questionable, but we can take good science and propel it to an unhealthy place. So, you might think you're doing everything right and not realize where we can be doing ourselves some harm. So this whole thing just plays right into our insecurities and concerns. And it makes me sad, really, that this happened for the people who, have had challenges with this. Like, if that's you and you're hearing this, please reach out to me. Like, you haven't failed. You are fine. There are options. You can find health and a healthful weight and enjoy your life. It makes me glad that we're here, and that's why we're here having this conversation and sharing this information with all of you. So Abigail, thank you again for, sharing your experience with us. Any other?
My pleasure. I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, any other questions about the F factor or these things that I was calling red flags or anything?
Well, one question I had for you is, when you review these COAs or C of A's, what are you looking for?
It's a great question. And it's really looking that they meet the requirements. A lot of it just gets very technical. There are doctors and professionals and quality control specialists that I look to for them to review them. I think I couldn't even tell you everything that we should be looking for, because I also rely on other experts who specialize in specifically that kind of quality control. I think simply the fact of releasing them is half of the battle, right? If they're willing to show it, it's likely not going to show something that's a problem. And then beyond that, really analyzing it, I also look to experts, because it's one of those things where, there are people whose entire lives are dedicated to the quality control of these kinds of manufacturing facilities and programs and, operations and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But like you said, it's definitely a learning experience for all of us, and happy to have people like you out there, leading the way in the journey of wellness that never ends.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. And by the way, I know you have the package there. I'm going to ask you to text me a picture of it, and we'll do an analysis. We'll share it in our Facebook group.
Perfect.
Awesome. All right. Well, that means it's time for our nutrition nugget for this week. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. Awesome. Today, we're talking about holidays. So this weekend in the US is Labor Day. We get a long weekend. And while this Labor Day is surely different than Labor Days past, right? There are still outdoor gatherings, barbecues, and let's be real, we often celebrate holidays with food. So how can we enjoy the holiday and still maintain our momentum of health? So the first question is, decide the outcome you're looking for or willing to accept. So for example, given that this is simply a long weekend and potentially some extra alcohol or outdoor social plans, you might decide that you're willing to accept a gain of a pound or two on the scale. You might decide that you just want the scale to stay the same. Or you could decide to commit to not indulging. You could say, I just want to feel good at the end of the weekend and not have anything to beat myself up about, right? Whatever you decide for you is absolutely perfect. It's just to simply know the outcome that we're looking for. Okay, then think about what actions to take to achieve that outcome. So here are some ideas. Maybe it's bringing a vegetable-focused side or two to your barbecue so that you know you have quality choices. Perhaps offer to bring fruit so that you have an alternative for dessert, right? When everybody's eating dessert, you know you could choose to eat fruit. Of course, remember the 3-bite rule. We only taste and are present for the first, the second, and the last bite. So if that's the case, let's have those 3 and move on. Maybe think about having 1 drink at each event and then water, or keep a water in your hands so that it's harder to grab at things, right? I also recommend eating a little something before you go so that you're not experiencing low blood sugar and then it's chemically like climbing Mount Everest to make our healthful food choices. Make sure to plan your exercise and activity for the weekend so that your physical fitness remains a part of your routine, right? You could choose to focus on 1 plate for the meal. And if there are apps or finger foods around, put those things on a plate and maybe walk away from where the food is, all set out. To, again, it's how can we make it easier on ourselves to make the healthful choices and to stick to our plan, whatever we decide our plan is. I think, the idea here and like walking away from the food, like I always feel like if I'm standing right next to the food and having a conversation with someone, like I have 1 ear on the conversation we're having, and then 1 ear is in the dialogue in my head, but that's talking about all the food that's around. You know what I mean? So just remove yourself, right? Proximity is everything, and it can kind of shut down that whole conversation that we don't need. And I just threw out a whole bunch of ideas. You don't need to use all of them. Choose 1 or 2, come up with your own plan, again, just based on the outcome that you've decided you're looking for. And an overarching question worth considering is this, and I talk about this a lot when we talk about Thanksgiving, but it bears mention here as well. And that question is, what do you need to feel like you've had this holiday? What do you need over this long weekend to feel like you've had a long weekend and a holiday? So that might mean absolutely not working, right? Especially now when our work is at home and everything is happening in the 4 walls of our home, really setting that separation so that this feels like something different. It might mean ensuring you spend time with friends or family, taking time to relax. Really, what do you need? Be sure to plan that in. And for those things you need that are food related, think about how to do that in a healthful way. So if what makes you feel like it was Labor Day is having, a burger and a hot dog, then, how much of it do you have to feel like you had it? Maybe the 3-bite rule again applies, or maybe it's half a burger and half a hot dog so that you feel like you did your barbecue thing to end the summer, right? Be sure you get what you need to feel like you've had your holiday. And then finally, it might be worth it for you to plan the days right after the holiday. So have a plan for the rest of the week. This makes it easier to keep moving forward, KMF, keep moving forward, ensure that the holiday doesn't start a snowball. And remember, 1 holiday didn't make or break anyone's health, right? As I always say, consistency is king. So be sure you are set up for continued success following the holiday so you can keep moving forward. All right, Abigail, any questions related to holidays?
All I can say is, if I can add a tip, watermelon has been my go-to all summer, and
Yes.
It's the best. It's the perfect snack when I'm craving something sweet.
Absolutely. And there's an amazing watermelon feta and mint salad recipe.
It's the best.
I love that. Such a good tip.
Absolute best.
Yeah.
What are your go-tos for sides at the barbecue?
Sometimes I'll do like a coleslaw with a vinaigrette dressing that I'm making myself, so I know what's in it. Sometimes it's even just mixing a bunch of vegetables, maybe add some chickpeas to it, and almost making a salad that doesn't have lettuce. Certainly a lettuce-based salad could work too. I also love, like one of my indulgences is a salad with some fruit in it. So maybe it's kale with some grapes and avocado and maybe a little Parmesan cheese to go crazy, right? But just little things that make it a little more exciting. And I find we always think like, oh, no one else is going to eat this. And yet everybody does. So it always surprises me how much people appreciate those healthful options. And that watermelon feta salad, for sure.
Oh, that's definitely, would love to see that at the next barbecue I go to.
Yeah, well, you'll have to bring it.
I'll have to bring it. That's the thing. I need your recipe and I'll make it and I'll bring it. So it's perfect.
Yeah. We put it on my Instagram recently, so we'll find it and send it to you. Or if you guys have it from following the Instagram, tag us when you make it. And so with that, Abigail, thank you again for hanging out today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And as always, guys, I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck. Connect with me on Instagram at Jenn Trepeck, JennTrepeck. Our Facebook page is at the same handle. And we want to hear from you. So please DM your questions, ideas, your takeaway videos. It's also the easiest way to reach out to learn more about working with me directly and to address your personal concerns. Of course, if you're not already a member, join our membership program by going to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries to get this week's recipe for dairy-free creamy dressing. Use that on the side that you bring to the barbecue. And the article, 5 Simple Ways to Help Manage Stress During This New Normal. So everybody, be careful out there. If something seems too good to be true, enlist an expert to help you evaluate it. And if anything you're doing feels like it's making you more obsessed or exacerbating your relationship with food, I'm giving you permission to stop and reach out. I am here for you. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Well, friends, that's it for today's episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. Congratulations for making yourself and your health a priority. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to click subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform. Share us with a friend, and we'll be back next week. Always remember, you deserve it, and you are worth it. Happy healthy.